Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is the Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 1st of June 2025. Pinch and a punch for the first of the month, no returns. We have the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. Of course, you can find them listed in the description to the video, well, linked in the description to the video below. 1,230 personnel lost is a pretty high number, about where we've seen it for the last day or so. 5 tanks and 4 troop-carrying AFVs. These are numbers that are below the daily average and suggest that the Russians are not using traditional combat assets to do their attacks. Either they are purely infantry attacks or they're doing it on things like motorbikes and quads, and that's possibly supported by 127 vehicles and fuel tanks being destroyed over the last 24 hours. 1 piece of special equipment as well. We have 1 multiple launch rocket system and 52 artillery systems. That's about 2.5 times the daily average, so fairly significant in that category. There are, I guess, these are pretty typical numbers for the last week. Personnel, pretty good again, and artillery systems. Of course, remember these refer to actual human beings, so always worth remembering. And vehicles and fuel tanks, fairly decent there. Now, we look at Oryx, Jakub Janowski from Oryx doing the totting up of the numbers. Remember, these will not include the category of vehicles and fuel tanks, so they will give you a skewed understanding of what may be going on comparatively between the two nations. That Ukraine, I think, has done a better job of attriting trucks, but also a lot of motorcycles and quads and cars and SUVs and whatnot. Now, the Ukrainians will be losing a number of those as well, but we have seen over the time when Andrew Perpetua was doing the loss lists, that we had a huge number of Russian losses in those categories on a daily basis. Nonetheless, we have 29 Russian losses here to 22 Ukrainian losses. The Russian losses include a Buk air defense launcher, I believe. Do they not? Or maybe not Russian losses. That could be the Ukrainians losing that, which would be a bit of a kick in the teeth. No, we've got a Bogdana for the Ukrainians. That's a self-propelled gun, but mainly some mobility vehicles. Russians here with, I swear I saw a Buk launcher. Oh, here we go. Unknown Buk launcher. There it was, hiding in there. We've got a Grad, BM-21 Grad as well. So a few higher value pieces of kit there for the Russians, but not too much to write home about, I guess. Now, we are just hearing this morning that the Ukrainians have had a training ground hit again, but there was no massing of troops. All the troops were in their sort of shelters. Enemy launched a missile strike on a location of one of the training units of ground forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. Unfortunately, there are dead and wounded servicemen. We emphasise that no formations or mass gatherings of personnel were held. After the air raid siren warning was announced, most of the personnel were in shelters. The injured are being provided with all necessary qualified medical assistance. To clarify all the circumstances and causes of the personnel losses, a commission has been created, an internal investigation has been appointed, etc., etc. So another training site has hit, but hopefully not as catastrophic as has been seen previously, but certainly something to worry about for the Ukrainians there. Now, we hear that there are further POWs having been taken, as of taking another batch of prisoners in the Turets direction, which again confirms that the Ukrainians are on the attack, at least to some degree, in certain areas. We saw POWs being taken by airborne units in the Kursk direction yesterday. Russian soldiers say the Kiev Independent are surrendering because, quote, abuse in units is worse than captivity, according to Ukrainian paratroopers. So it could be those in the Kursk region claiming this. Russia's abuse of its own soldiers has been well documented throughout the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I've seen some horrific videos of Russian treatment of their own. Really, really horrible for a long time. Now, we've had POW swaps, as we know. I have wondered consistently whether the Russians particularly are sending their troops straight back to the front line. after they are received as POWs? Do they give them rehab time? You know, it's a difficult one because you want to give them rehabilitation and make sure they're all psychologically okay and in good physical health, having been, you know, captured and maybe put through some horrible times. But on the other hand, you're going to be pressured to find truth, and both sides are going to have this pressure to make sure you've got units filled and reconstituted, and you know, recruitment targets are being hit. And what do you do with POWs? How long do you give them? You know, is it right that you try and pressure them to go back to the front line? All these questions are no doubt at the forefront for both sides, to be perfectly frank. So it's interesting that we hear, this is the first time I've heard this, Savagery of Russia, says Jay in Kiev. A Russian woman complains that the Russian POWs that were exchanged in last week's huge 1,000 for 1,000 exchange were punished when they reached Russian soil. Phones and personal belongings were taken, and they're now headed back to the front. Now, that's just a single anecdote. Can't speak to the accuracy of the claim there. But it wouldn't surprise me, and the awful part is that there could be some kind of feeling of blame that they were captured, and you know, them being punished is, yeah, it certainly leaves a sour taste in the mouth. Associated Press investigation has uncovered at least 206 deaths of Ukrainian prisoners of war in Russian captivity. Up to 95% of those released were subjected to systematic torture. So almost every POW that's been released has been tortured in some way. The causes of death range from heart failure and diseases, tuberculosis, pneumonia, to infections, asphyxiation, and trauma. The Russians are holding the bodies until the cause of death cannot be identified, sometimes without internal organs or with hidden injuries. A representative of the coordination headquarters notes. So we heard this with, or saw this with, the Ukrainian journalist Victoria Rushchina, was it, who was repatriated with missing organs as well, and it looked like she had been tortured, as well as I think she had refused to eat too. So she had gone through an awful process. In Kherson, Zarina Zabritsky reports yesterday Russians killed a 27-year-old student of philology. His mother got his body from under the rubble. On the right, do not be silent about Kherson. A high school graduate from Kherson region on her prom day. Yesterday, 3 were killed, 10 were injured, and this is every day. It's happening every day. Now, I am hopefully going to interview Zarina Zabritsky. She has a new documentary out at the moment. I think it's on YouTube, but I'll look into that and get you some more details, but hopefully we'll be in contact soon. Right, Madjan, I shared this with you on a live stream yesterday, has reported that his unit for May 2025 has killed or wounded 2,221 Russians. That's his unit alone. That's a 23% increase on April, so a further 417 casualties. The unit's goal is to have 100 Russian casualties a day, amounting to 3,000 a month. He is very much at the center of Ukrainian drone innovation and drone effectiveness. His units are doing an incredible job. There was talk about there being a 42-kilometer fiber optic drone strike on a Russian piece of equipment, which shows an incredible range there. Well, there are so many of these videos coming out. Ukrainian, says Roy here, Ukrainian fiber optic drones are steadily ramping up in numbers and are wreaking havoc on Russian vehicles. The Russians try to hide them in buildings, but the fiber optic drones exploit their freedom from radio line of sight constraints to go inside and find them. So what happens if you have a radio controlled drone? Then actually going inside the building will cut the feed to the drone, and they will not be able to function in this way. They will just sort of drop to the ground type thing. Fiber optic drones connected with a cable to the operator can just sort of drive around, look at everything that's inside these hangars, and then hit the target that they want. And we've seen that image before. So lots of fiber optic drone strikes, And here we've got Robert Magyar talking about that. In fact, that video is one I'll be showing on the on my next military aid update. Okay, what else? Drones of the Bulava unit hunted a Zoopark 1 radar in the Novopavlivka direction. These radars are very, very expensive, so that is a good strike for the Ukrainians there. I don't know the extent of the damage done, but something like a Zoopark 1 will be fairly sensitive, so I imagine any kind of explosion on it is going to cause some issue. And we have some video footage of a Russian bemoaning a camp left devastated by Ukrainian deliveries from above. So here we have the video showing his camp having been destroyed by some munition or other. We've got destroyed equipment, motorbike there, and it's quite a long video here, so I'm going to just full screen that. We have, so vehicles and all sorts destroyed in that camp strike. Fairly typical there. Looks like some generators as well. Such a long one. I wonder if that's a Sony phone that's recorded on. Right. Ukrainian Su-27. Again, I keep showing you these. They're happening so frequently. The videos being provided by the Ukrainians to show the guided glide bombs being used effectively. Here we have a Su-27 supposedly striking with 2 GBU-62 bombs at the location of enemy assault groups near the village of Bahatir. So this is down in the Karakova direction, in the corner of the Eastern Fronts, and real devastation being done by these strikes. Is this the one where I don't think it is. There was another one I was seeing where, there was another strike on these sorts of buildings, and there was definitely lots of personnel there as you saw them sort of running around in the video. So they are being used effectively, the guided glide bombs. I'd like to see the comparative usage right now at the moment. The Russian usage compared to the Ukrainians. The Russians have traditionally used throughout this war a huge number of these bombs on a daily basis. I don't know if that's still the case. Whether the Ukrainians have upped their usage and the ratios have improved. Now, a warehouse of rubber products was on fire yesterday in Krasnogorsk. A huge fire this was, by the look of it, and as with rubber tires, it's going to form a lot of polluting black smoke. I don't know that this has anything to do with the war, but it is only 10 kilometers from Putin's residence, Krasnogorsk, near Moscow, at LTD Kolesnik Limited factory, which produces galoshes and rubber footwear. It's engulfed in flames. Eyewitnesses report that smoke pillars can be seen from various districts of Moscow itself. Pretty substantial fire there yesterday. Now we have an awful lot of tabs to discuss railway activity last night. So trying to work out what's happened, because there are obviously going to be claims that all of these were Ukrainian sabotage operations. But of course, if the Russians admit that it means that the Ukrainians have successfully got deep into Russian territory. So that becomes embarrassing. Then there are claims of false flag operations. Then there are claims that it's just poor maintenance. But then you've got the coincidence of some of these happening at the similar sort of times. So anyway, with all that in mind, let's read through a few analyses. So 2 bridges collapsed in Bryansk and Kursk regions of Russia last night, says Anton Gerashenko, damaging a passenger and freight trains. Now, the problem is, if the Ukrainians did both of these and the passenger train was hit, then that is civilian infrastructure or a civilian vehicle being taken out, which has caused civilian deaths. So that's why, you could get some denials from the Ukrainians, or it shows that it probably is poor maintenance because Ukrainians wouldn't do that on purpose. That kind of argument going on. So I don't know. I am just going to report these to you. So Russian authorities say they were blown up, although some caveats to that because they've retracted some claims. Anyway, we'll get to that in a second. This looks like the work of Russian FSB before the next round of talks in Istanbul. So that's how Anton Gerashenko is interpreting it. In Bryansk region, a bridge collapsed as a passenger train was going under it. Russian media report that 7 people were killed and 73 more were injured. In Kursk region, another bridge collapsed as a cargo train was moving on it. One of the locomotive engineers damaged his legs in the incident. Russia's investigative committee claims that the bridges in Bryansk and Kursk region have collapsed from explosions. Russian MP Kartopolov is already blaming Ukraine. Okay, so Tim White here showing some footage, and there's lots of footage of these incidents. He says, "Well, I can gather, a road bridge going over the railway at Vygonichi collapsed while a lorry was crossing. A Moscow train hit the ruins of the bridge. The vast majority of the injured were on the train." So the idea of what happened here in this one is that the lorry driving over the Bryansk bridge collapsed the bridge, and the train hit the rubble as it tried to pass under, through the destroyed bridge. Prune 60 was saying a bridge with cars on it collapsed onto a passenger train that was traveling beneath it near Vygonichi in Bryansk. Reports suggest 4 explosive devices were used. And footage is there of the destruction of that bridge. I would caution people from immediately assuming that Ukraine was behind this without proof. There are other possible factors at play, including ISIS, as there have been suggestions that ISIS might attack passenger trains in the past. It's been a while since that's happened, but it has happened. The fact that it's a passenger train and not a freight train makes me suspicious, but like I've said, I wouldn't begin to speculate here without more details. And that place is quite far into Bryansk. However, this was the place where there were claims of a very deep Ukrainian incursion. If you remember, was it a week ago or so, there were claims that the Ukrainians got that far in, and there were loads of internal security vehicles. Then there were some claiming there were 7 to 8 Ukrainians involved there, or different claims as to what was going on. It was an awful long way into Russia, considering Russia controlled all of this area here. So that's interesting. Could that have been a false flag operation ahead of this? Could that have been a genuine Ukrainian operation ahead of this? Anyway, Russian railways clarified that the derailment of the locomotive and carriages of passenger train number 86, the Klimov-Moscow, occurred at 10:44 last night on a single track section in the Bryansk region. Seems to suggest that it was rigged to explode when a train travelled over it, and that another span may collapse. Something else I warn you related to any sort of event like this, even when no sabotage is expected, do not assume whatever report you read is entirely accurate, especially when it comes to things like the number of people on board or injured. They will fluctuate wildly. For example, the head of the region will give one number, a reporter will give another, Russian railways will give another, emergency response another, and just keep in mind the actual number in the end may be different. So, quote, "The situation with the derailment of the train does not affect the movement of other trains," the Moscow Railway reported. I mean, really? Yeah, so just trying to see if there are other important points to note. So various pictures, train carriages. Okay. So, and it's worth noting, we're going to come to that footage in a second, that actually properly there are many incidents of bridges collapsing from poor maintenance. So an image from the bridge collapse incident in the Bryansk region that isn't at a really weird angle. This image certainly makes it look more like the train ran into the bridge, and that's what we heard, but that's from the Bryansk region. So yes, so much information coming out on this. So Chris Owicki says, "The 2 fatal bridge collapses in 24 hours have highlighted the shoddy state of Russia's railway infrastructure. Despite a recent record level of investment, much of the money has been stolen by corrupt contractors and Russian railways officials," he says, showing a couple of these images. Now, the Russian crime website, which tracks corruption in Russia, reports that schemes for embezzling tens of billions of rubles, procurement abuses, overstated project costs, and abuse of official position for personal gain have been uncovered in Russian railways. The scale of the problem is systemic and spans the length of Russia. In 2023 alone, 143 criminal cases of corruption were opened against employees and officials of the Russian railways, with 111 people convicted so far. Much of this relates to procurement fraud, exploiting the railways' high level of state funding. Typical crimes include kickbacks, price gouging, collusion with suppliers, including being paid to overlook corruption, overpaying for work, and accepting poor quality work. Under RZD CEO Oleg Belozerov, appointed in 2015, investment grew to a record $19.4 billion in 2024. However, this was accompanied by an unprecedented increase in freight tariffs, which drove many customers to switch to road and water instead. RZD failed to bring down the high cost of its infrastructure projects. It has funneled money into to single contractors selected without competition in corrupt schemes, so on and so forth. There's this idea that it could be poor maintenance behind this, but the cause of the two recent bridge collapses is not yet known, but it's likely to have been a result of a lack of maintenance or maintenance work being done poorly. Similar problems are likely to exist across the Russian railway network. It's how he is interpreting it. So while it seems that Russia is likely prepping the propaganda foundation to blame their Bryansk bridge collapse on Russia, says Spravdi, a reminder that bridges are constantly collapsing in Russia, not requiring any help from Ukraine at all. So a recent list, they say today the Bryansk region one was a highway bridge collapse onto a moving passenger train from Kilmovo to Moscow, resulting in at least 7 fatalities and over 50 injuries. So they claim that is maintenance. April 2024, Vyazma, Smolensk Oblast. October 2023, Buryatia. July 2022, November 2020, July 2018, May 2015. This is one of the sort of famous images, which is quite similar looking to what happened potentially last night. But of course, loads of caveats here. So a vehicle traveling over a bridge that just massively collapses onto the railway. So if a train is then hurtling towards that at some speed, it's not going to be able to stop, and then bosh. But, is that what happened last night? Russian news service report an IED caused the Bryansk bridge collapse. Earlier, 6 explosives were placed under a railway in Belgorod, says Grayskull. So this is the translation. The IED could have been planted under a bridge span in the Bryansk region. According to MASH, the train was traveling along the Kilmov-Moscow route. A similar incident occurred on May the 25th in the Belgorod region. Then 6 explosives were placed under the rails. A train ran over one of them. According to Governor Alexander Bogomaz, the case is under the control of the administration and the victims are receiving assistance. Okay. Now, Russian channel says that the same sabotage group may have been responsible for the bridge attack on May the 21st and today. So this is what I was talking about previously. We will simply remind you about the Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group that was discovered on May the 21st in the Bryansk region, right in the area of the blown up bridge, and the existence of which was denied by the authorities of the Bryansk region. After all, it would be a shame if something happened. As a result, if this is a result of the actions of those same saboteurs, then for almost 10 days, no one examined potential targets in the area of its action. After all, there were no saboteurs, and now everyone is embarrassed to call the blowing up of the bridge an explosion. Someone simply interfered with the work of transport, and then something happened. Okay, so it's all confusing. Now, The Guardian reports on this. Russia says explosions led to deadly train crashes in Bryansk and Kursk regions. Investigators say blasts caused 2 bridges to collapse, triggering derailments and at least 7 deaths. But it says halfway through this article, or towards the end of the article actually, there was no immediate comment from Russian investigators on the cause of either collapse. Moscow Railways, a state-owned railway operator, at first blamed the Bryansk crash on, quote, illegal interference in the operation of transport in a post online, but it later appeared to have removed the reference to illegal interference. So this is the idea that even the Russians have scaled back some claims about Ukrainian sabotage effectively. So just don't know. A Russian investigative committee deleted a post in which it called the collapse of the bridges in the Kursk and Bryansk regions explosions. It says max 25 here, and you can go and look at the original Russian posts there. And then we have another train incident. Russian military freight train. So this is definitely to do with the Ukrainians, because this happened in occupied Ukraine and was a military train. So Russian military freight train blown up en route to Crimea, according to Ukraine's HUR. So this is military intelligence claiming this. Quote, the Muscovites' key logistical artery on the occupied territory of Zaporizhia Oblast and Crimea has been destroyed, the statement said. So a third military target rail network operated by the Russian army was struck last night, and this time Russian-occupied Ukraine. The Ukrainian GUR reports that on the night of the 31st, a train moving from Melitopol to Crimea was struck near the city of Yakimivka. So there it is. On the way from Melitopol, I presume is there, on the way down to Crimea. So that was struck. The train consisted of fuel and freight cars. As a result of the explosion, the train derailed. The rail track is crucial for the logistical support of the Russian army in the south of Ukraine. That's also being reported in Euromaidan Press. What else do we know? Ukraine has been conducting an air campaign against Russian strategic targets such as ammo depots, command centers, military factories, oil processing and storage facilities in Russia and Russian-occupied territory. The campaign is aided by sabotage activities. In the first half of December 2024, multiple sabotage acts targeted rail infrastructure inside Russia. These included the destruction of railway tracks and the burning of 5 locomotives, underlining an escalated campaign against logistical nodes. According to Ukraine's main intelligence directorates, of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, an explosion occurred on the railway line close to Yakimivka in the Melitopol district. Freight train, which included fuel tanks, was moving towards Crimea when the blast hit. As a result, freight cars and the tanker cars went off the rails, and a track was severely damaged. A key logistical artery of the Russians on the occupied territory of Zaporizhia Oblast and Crimea was targeted. The agency stated that this disruption undermines Moscow's ability to maintain military logistics in the south. So they are definitely ramping up activity on railways. The GUI has blown up the Russian military train near temporarily occupied Melitopol. So I believe, although this image was also attached to earlier threads that were talking about the other two incidents, I presume this is the one in the Melitopol area. The train was carrying fuel tankers and freight cars. That, as far as I know, is one of the only images of that incident, certainly that I've seen so far. Tendar goes on to say the Russian rail network is essential for Russia's military logistics and economy. It's the only means for Russia to haul supplies in large quantities through the country, especially the rail tracks leading to Ukraine, which are absolutely crucial for Russia to be operational. Without them, the war effort would fall apart quite soon. While many points out that the Kerch bridge linking Russia and Crimea is important, it is by far not the only weak link. There are plenty of bridges in the regions of Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, and especially Rostov that are quite vulnerable. The attached map shows a rail network of Russia and Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine. Due to the length, it's not feasible for Russians to protect them. In many cases, it is enough to cut a rail track just at one point to render a connection between two far-reaching cities inoperable. So I've talked previously about if you're going to blow up railway lines, you've got to do bridges, because railway lines can be replaced pretty quickly. Bridges are a lot more difficult to rebuild. Interesting that we have 3 bridges that have been targeted, it seems, today, or in the last 24 hours. So it's been a rough 12 hours for Russian trains, says Jay in Kiev. Bryansk region, that explosion on a railway track, no casualties, no train damage. Bryansk, it says 2 in the Bryansk region, he says. So 1 in Unechka, Zhecha, and then you've got the Vygonitsky district one, where the bridge collapsed onto the railway, passenger train derailed, at least 7 deaths, dozens injured. Kursk region, rail bridge collapsed, freight train derailed, driver injured, no fatalities. Zaporizhia region, derailed a military train train carrying cargo and fuel, no specific casualty or damage details provided. So this first one, Bryansk region, there, what's going on with that one? Well, it could be this. Okay, what is this? And so now we're just hearing, this only came out just half an hour ago. Another rail incident in Russia occurred, according to Russian media, about an hour ago. Unknown individuals blew up a railway section of the Unecha-Zhecha line in Bryansk region. A track inspection train was passing through at the time, but was not damaged. So could be some minor details there. Now we're hearing a partisan destruction of a relay cabinet on the Volnovakha-Mariupol railway. So that's a new one in the south of Ukraine that the Russians have built. So a bit of partisan activity there. And then, so the railways obviously being targeted, or poor maintenance, or whatever, however you want to interpret that. Massive fire. And I haven't seen too much reference to this, so, you know, caveats and whatnot. But there appears to be a huge fire in an open pit mine in the Karanorsky, it's the Karanorsky open pit mine. The scale is significant, says this source. Local Telegram channel site eyewitnesses saying, quote, they haven't been able to do anything for about 4 to 5 days now. Wow. So, yeah, huge fire. And in fact, it is on firms, and it is a massive fire. That is a considerable firms set of imagery there, or firms data. So, yeah, some big Russia on fire imagery coming out there. Right, okay, moving on to distant strikes, and actually very little information coming out from strikes last night. In fact, there is not yet an infographic out. It's partly why I'm a little bit delayed. I was waiting for more and more. Okay, interesting. So there is a little bit more information, or some information of a new strike potentially by the Ukrainians. And there are presently air alerts in Crimea. So there are drones active over Crimea. We'll come to that other one in a second. Let's just leave that for now. Right. Okay. So I don't know how many drones were sent into Ukraine last night, but Special Kherson Cat has a thread, a very short thread, saying most successful night yet for anti-Shahed drone interceptors during the attack on Kyiv. And I presume this is from last night, because this is this morning's thread. Last night, during a Russian drone attack on Kyiv, Ukrainian defenders from the Chistenibo unit, part of the unmanned systems forces, intercepted 15 enemy Shahed drones with anti-Shahed interceptors. And some imagery here from these guys working hard to do that. We can see that the unit uses the same type of anti-Shahed interceptor drone that was shown earlier in April for the first time. So this is a very modern looking one that we saw, and I showed you an image of this with the blue lights at some expo. I think it's when they had, was it when all the ministers were in Kyiv recently, foreign ministers, and this was on show, and actually it appears to be being used last night, having great success, this unit, with shooting down 15 drones with anti-drone interceptors. I think this is a cat and mouse game, right? Measure, countermeasure, measure, countermeasure. So the Russians have done a really good job of changing the routes, changing the tactics, changing the heights, having quick terminal dives, being beyond the range of, say, Browning machine guns and many of the mobile units. So flying them high, different paths, but also chips on board to be resistant to electronic warfare, fly faster, bigger warheads, all these things that are like playing around with the measure countermeasure relationship. And then the Ukrainians obviously working hard to adapt to these new situations. And it could well be that this would be a difficult one for the Russians to adapt to. Right, so if you start getting, and I saw another, I wonder if it's worth me trying to find that, because I just saw another image or video of a new Ukrainian counter drone being tested. Yeah, I don't know if I can find that, but I've got it ready for my military aid video. But it's going to be, I think, this is my intuition, difficult for the Russians to deal as effectively with counter, anti-drone interceptors, because that's a case of a drone that's going faster than the Shahed drone to be able to hit it and blow it up, and the only way you can get around that, because I presume they're not using, they're not being controlled. I presume they'll be using AI, so you can't interfere with the interceptor drone. Again, a lot of speculation from me here. But these are going to be at night. You're not going to be controlling it by a controller. I'm pretty sure you'll be sending these things up, and then they'll be detecting their targets, locking onto the targets, which means that it's very difficult to interfere with the interceptor drone. So the only thing you can really do is try and outpace them, and then it's just a cat and mouse game with the speed. Yeah, I can't find it. There's another new drone that I was looking at this morning, which is an interceptor drone. So I think the Ukrainians could be counting on that as their way of adapting to the new tactics of the Russian drones. But yeah, just seeing. So, okay, possibly the largest Russian Shahed drone attack on Ukraine is still underway. This was 4 hours ago in Kyiv. The air raid has lasted over 7 hours, and in some regions it's been more than 9 hours. Last night could have been a significant night of drones. Everyone's talking about all these railway attacks at the moment, and there's very little information on drone activity. So it could be that the Russians did release a huge bunch of drones into Ukraine last night. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm surprised that there's not more information coming out about that from my usual sources. Anyway, yeah, no, just trying to get a handle on everything there. Trying to find that other video of that new drone as well, because it's quite an interesting looking drone, very long, thin, black one that was catapulted from the ground. But anyway, yeah, we'll go on. Okay, so what else do we have? We hear Euromaidan Press claims that boom, $3 million gone. Russia fired a precision missile at a Ukrainian airfield, hoping to hit Yak-52s. So these are the old planes that are being used they're two-seater planes, and someone in the back seat with a shotgun or similar is flying around. These planes are flying around trying to find Shaheds, or actually, no, they're not. They're trying to find reconnaissance drones, more likely. In particularly the Odessa region, they've been used, and Mykolaiv, I think, and they're shooting down these drones with the person in the back seat. So then the Russians appear to have tried to hit an airfield with these Yaks, but the Yaks weren't there. It's just old hobby planes. Epic fail, proving missiles are only as good as the intel there, says the Euromaidan Press. So a big expensive missile thrown at this airfield actually doesn't hit the runway quite there either. But it apparently only took out old hobby planes. Somebody's going to be pretty annoyed that their Cessna has been taken out there. But yeah, so here it is. I found it. So here is a new drone interceptor drone. This one's on Trent Telenko, well, actually Samuel Bender originally, where we have this long thin drone there, and it's that propeller on the back. It gets catapulted from the ground, and there you go. Elasticated. I mean, simple but effective, isn't it? And then that goes up, and it's got pace. So that's clearly got some useful pace on it, and that is designed to take out other drones. Might not be Shahids, might be designed to take out in reconnaissance drones or Lancets or similar. But anyway, that's all I want to show you. Russia claims that strikes in the Sumy region, so this was not last night but the night before, during the night destroyed 2 HIMARS launchers. So you remember I showed you these pictures here of a farm being hit and whatnot, and infrastructure that was very civilian looking. We've got a bread delivery vehicle being taken out. Well, the Russians claim that they took out 2 HIMARS in those strikes, along with ammunition for them. Tim White says that may or may not have been true, but there are no reports or even signs of such a massive explosion with secondary blasts having taken place. So Russians make claims. It could be true, might not be. Who knows? It's probably less likely it is true, but we shouldn't dismiss these claims out of hand. Interesting that while searching for mushrooms, some people came across several lost Russian drones in a forest there. I mean, that looks like 3 drones. That's a Shahid type drone, and again there, and then another one, or is that a signpost that's fallen on? I don't know, but yeah, amazing what you can find when looking for mushrooms, right? So this is some footage from a strike. I think it was on May the 22nd here, showing the Splav factory getting hit. One of the strikes the other night, or about 10 days ago now, in Tula. Ukrainian drone targeted that site in Tula. Just some more footage coming out from the ground. Now, this is what's just coming out at the moment. Preliminary reports indicate explosions were heard near Olenya Air Base in Russia's Murmansk region. This is a good 1,800 kilometers from Ukraine's border, and it has been targeted a number of times. The Ukrainians are not unused to going for the Olenya Air Base. There's no visual confirmation at the time. Olenya hosts strategic bombers used in airstrikes against Ukraine, and obviously it'd be useful to stop them being able to wreak havoc on Ukraine. But yeah, still yet to hear too much about Russia's attacks on Ukraine last night. And here we go. So this is, it's literally just coming out now, and this is on Olenya, where there is actually now some imagery coming out. So more footage from the site, reportedly near or at the Olenya Air Base. It's claimed that 10 explosions were heard prior to a fire breaking out. So I don't know what that site is. In fact, there might be, some fairly considerable damage having been done. Let's go to my feed here. So more from Olenya Air Base. We have quite a bit of smoking distance there. Explosions reported at the airbase there in Murmansk region. That looks wide, some pretty widespread smoke and associated explosions, no doubt. Drone attack reported there. So we'll have to see what the battle damage assessment is for Olenya. But that's really good news for the Ukrainians. But still no news on what's going on in what took place in Ukraine last night. Right, on to other bits and pieces. It's been a long one already. The second Russian pocket has emerged in the Sumy Oblast near Alexandria village. According to Deep State maps, Russia seized more territory in Sumy in the last 24 hours, creating a second pocket of occupied land along Ukraine's northern border. Jay in Kyiv says, with Putin having successfully stopped the US from adding sanctions that would likely stop Russia by merely planning fake meetings, the Russians are now free to press further into Ukraine. A piece of Sumy has apparently just been occupied. Trump has solved all of Putin's problems, says Jay in Kyiv. Now, we hear that the US has finally granted... so I talked about this yesterday in 2 videos, actually. So US has finally granted access codes for Link 16. Now they no longer need to find a way to integrate the Swedish pledged ASC-890 AEW aircraft. Now, the way that Jeff 2146 is stating this, and reference to the Militiani article, I wonder if the Swedish AWACS have been so delayed in getting to Ukraine because they've been waiting for Link 16 access. So this could well be very, very important. It's the enabler for these Swedish aircraft that apparently, it was all on schedule, and they were going to, it wasn't that it all been cancelled or anything because we were waiting so long for these AWACS aircraft to become operational. But it could be that the spanner in the works there, it was actually the Link 16 access, and that being solved yesterday could be could be big for Ukraine. Now, the volume of overdue mortgages in Russia is now doubling every 6 months. Evgeny Yistribin here says the volume of overdue debt on mortgage loans increased by 9.6% in a month. The growth for the year is 96%. As of May the 1st, the volume of overdue debt amounted to 125.5 billion rubles. That's plus 11 billion in a month, and that is coming from the central bank themselves. So it's going to be at least that bad. It's almost exponential in its direction at the moment. But yes, this could be very problematic for Russia going forward. Now, I've got so much to say about what's happening in the United States of America at the moment. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, is apparently wanting Fox News to help turn Trump's intelligence briefings into TV shows because he doesn't read. So I've been complaining about Trump, A, not taking intelligence briefings, and B, not reading. So how does he get any knowledge on anything ever in the world? All he does is he's entirely dependent upon what people tell him just around him, which is no in-depth knowledge. You guys get some knowledge from what I tell you, but this is information-dense stuff that you sit down and you take in, and I'm often reading information-dense material. Like for Trump, he's just like, people are speaking to him in probably bullet points. He's not getting in-depth knowledge and understanding of geopolitical, economic, domestic, political events, when he's just relying on Stephen Miller whispering sweet nothings in his ear occasionally. Just unbelievable. So we're hearing bizarre things like there's been Chrissy Noem's touted this idea of having a TV show for immigrants, and if they win some kind of TV show, it's a bit like, I don't know, like The Running Man or whatever, all these dystopian ideas like Hunger Games, right? They've actually touted that as something for immigrants to do, and I guess if they win, they get to stay as a citizen or something. Now we're hearing that that the director of national security, Tulsi Gabbard, wants to turn President Trump's daily intel briefings into a Fox News type broadcast because he doesn't read. Quote, doesn't read. Gabbard is hoping to add animations and more dynamic multimedia elements to Trump's president's daily briefs, or PDBs, to fit his viewing habits and hold his attention. 5 people with knowledge of the discussions told NBC News. That's how desperate the situation is. We'd heard this from Trump 1.0, that he wouldn't take intelligence briefings and then only would if they were like accompanied with imagery, and he paid even more attention if it was imagery of himself. And by the way, someone's just taken a picture of Trump's phone, and the screensaver or the lock screen on Trump's iPhone is a picture of Trump, right? So his own lock screen is him. That's how narcissistic he is. So if we're hearing rumors that he won't take intelligence briefings unless it got pictures of him in it, then kind of that does fit in with known data. So it's just, I don't know, it's just insane what is going on. Right, a few last things here. Please help out with, and this will be linked below, with a petition run by a British guy. So if you're British, only if you're British, can you do this, because you have to have British postcode, I think. This is an official government petition. What happens at 10,000 signatures, the government responds to the petition, and at 100,000 signatures, petition will be considered for debate in Parliament, right? That's the way we do it here. And at the moment, it's just gone over 10,000. Let's get this to 100,000 signatures. So this is about the infantry fighting vehicles that are being phased out. The Warrior, 632 Warrior IFVs. 80 of them are awaiting near-term disposal, and the rest are to be scrapped by 2030. Let's get them to Ukraine. I'm hopeful that they would end up going anyway, but let's at least put a signature to that. Nice that in the PSG absolute mauling last night of Inter, I saw the highlights of this, and yeah, so this is a Champions League final if you like your football. PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, French team winning it for the first time ever, but winning it in style with a 5-0 victory over Inter Milan. Their captain Marquinhos and 10-year-old Mikhailik Pali from Pokrova Lviv amputee team in Ukraine led the PSG team onto the field at the Champions League final. Diagnosed with severe cancer at 7, Mikhailuk lost a leg and now plays football on crutches. By the way, PSG won 5-0. So this is absolutely wonderful that Ukraine is getting, as you can see there, that's not from that's not the Champions League final there, by the way, but that is him. So that's really cool, and a nice one to leave you with here. It's been a long one. Thanks for sticking with me. Appreciate your support. Here's a surprise visit to a school ceremony by a serving dad.
Питали, заради чого ти воюєш. Я там щось трошки розказав про код нації, про свідомість. Я там сидів в цій кибіці, щоб мене ніхто не бачив, і слухав, як діти співають, танцюють. Тут все зрозуміло, заради чого, так?
So there you go, something to warm the cockles. Take care, everybody. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.